This drawing is called AI Controlling a Giant Space Eel. This is the final result we're going to get to at the end of today's tutorial. Okay, I've scanned the drawing in, brought it into Photoshop. I've added some levels to it already. I'm going to make a new gradient map, drag that above the levels, so we don't want the levels to affect anything further on. Gonna double click on the name, call it something sensible like general. Yeah, make sure your properties tab is displayed so you can see the gradient map. Yep, click on this leftmost color stop, click on the little color, and we're going to adjust this first color. Let's go for a nice cool blue color. Yeah, we're going to choose a color that sort of anchors the whole composition. All the gradient maps, no matter what color they're going to be displaying, will have the same shadow color. Okay, going to click in the middle of the color bar to add another color stop. Just get sort of a mid-tone. A bit too saturated. Keeping it in the cool part of the spectrum. Yeah, gradient can have up to 100 color stops, but that would be a bit crazy because Photoshop doesn't make it easy to see the individual color stops when you have so many. Okay, yeah, nice cool sort of highlight color for this general layer. Yeah, happy with that. Click OK. Okay, yeah. We're going to duplicate this layer by right clicking on this layer name. Go up to the top of that menu, duplicate layer. What should we call this? Yeah, we'll do the walkway in the background next. Okay, you'll see that you get this sort of unwanted doubling effect because the new gradient map layer is working on the background, on the gradient map layer underneath. Okay, select the layer map for that new gradient map and Control I converts it, takes all the pixels away. Let's set up our brush because we're going to start painting into the gradient map. Layer mask. Make sure white is selected. You can hit X if you need to swap the black and the white. Yeah, shift left clicking gives you a nice straight line. Nice little Photoshop feature. Let's just click on the gradient map editor to just throw some initial color values to make this gradient map look different from the general one. We won't be seeing the correct effect until we cut out the gradient map selection from the gradient mask layer underneath. But we'll do that in a little while. Yeah, I'm going to do the walkway in the foreground. I'm going to keep that in the same gradient map layer. So yeah, just gonna add more pixels to represent the walkway in the foreground of the image. Just speed up this little process here. Again, shift left click to make Photoshop draw a straight line no matter what brush you're using while you're painting. Yeah, let's duplicate that general layer again. Let's call this pipes. No, tubes actually. Pipes are generally straight, aren't they? Tubes are more flexible, like in this drawing. Yep, select the layer mask, Control I to invert the mask, so we have no pixels in the layer mask. And let's start just throwing some pixels into this layer mask. So we've got pixels to work with. We're going to go over the walkway layer, but we're going to fix that in a second. Let's just speed this up. Right, yeah, control left click to make a selection based on this layer mask underneath. Then making sure the top layer mask is selected, hit delete, and that will cut out the walkway from the overlapped bit of the tubes. Yeah, let's just start adjusting the colours on this. By the way, I know there's a lot of annotation on the screen. I'm trying to make the tutorial suitable for all skill levels, so if there's any total Photoshop beginners watching, they'll start picking up some of the keyboard shortcuts that are useful when you're just generally using Photoshop. Okay. Yeah, we'll go sort of more of a green sort of colour for the tubes. But yeah, they were a bit too saturated. And you can, yeah, I bring the middle colour stop up, which gives the effect of darkening the whole gradient map. Yeah, use the square brackets to change the size of your brush if needed. And then start painting in. I start painting in the tubes, rest of the tubes. Do the ones in the background. And again, control left click, select the layer mask. Then I go into the layer mask underneath, making sure black is the background color, hitting delete, and that cuts out the pixels at the top from the layer mask below. Gonna do that in general as well. The layer mask of general, I mean. Okay, so when you see the gradient map without it being influenced by any other gradient map, you get the true color, and you can see that the tube one is way too bright and chalky. Same with the walkway. I've cut that out, so we're seeing the tube gradient map totally isolated, the walkway gradient map isolated, and the general gradient map isolated. So now I'm just going to adjust the colors because they're far too light and chalky. Chalky is a technical term for me saying they're too desaturated. Okay, yeah, let's bring add a bit more coolness to that yellow, that warm yellow. Let's desaturate it. So yeah, we're after a warm grey in this bit for the walkways, sort of like industrial concrete look. Let's revisit the tube gradient map. Okay, yeah, it's down to your artistic taste and sensibilities, how you know, what colours you sort of choose. What I like about the gradient map colouring technique is that the shadow, you'll notice the shadow colour is the same in all of the gradient map layers, and I think that sort of ties everything in the composition, especially with a drawing, sketchy style sort of drawing, where the boundaries of each object are sort of quite vague. You see there, I just saved the whole image. Yeah, make sure you save as you go along. You don't want someone kicking your power cable out. Okay, I've duplicated the tubes gradient map layer, called it Robot Orange. Yeah, I hit Control A to select all the pixels in the layer mask of the new robot orange, and I hit the delete key, making sure that the black was the background colour, and that got rid of all the pixels. Now I'm just throwing some pixels into this robot orange layer mask, just so I've got pixels to work with while I adjust the colours. Got impatient, didn't bother finishing the whole robot. Yeah, just colour coding that layer so I know when I look at this PSD file in about 5 years time I've got a chance of knowing what's going on. Okay, yeah, let's just throw some oranges in. Little note about the composition. I want the viewer's eye to be drawn to the robot first, and then the eye of the Space Eel second. So I'm going to make the robot nice shiny orange colour, bit C3PO like, just so the colour contrast draws the viewer's eye to the robot first. Okay, now I'm cutting out the robot layer pixels from the other layer masks. Then you sort of see the true value of the robot's gradient map. It is far too bright, so let's correct that. Yeah, drag the image around so we get a better view of it in context. Yeah, highlight that hex value. This is how you can paste colour values between colour stops. Yeah, let's darken it right down. Sort of going for a nice coppery bronze colour. Again, you'll note on the left, I'm not touching that colour stop, that dark colour stop, because I want all the elements of the picture to sit together. And I believe having the same shadow colour or the same dark tone really makes everything sit in. Okay, yeah, going for adjusting the highlight colour. Yeah, that looks pretty good for now. Maybe take down the saturation a tad. Okay. That's good enough to continue working with. So let's fill in the rest of the layer mask for the robot. You know, using the square brackets, change the size of the brush, and I'm going to speed this up so you don't get put to sleep. Okay, those pixels need cutting out, the other layer masks. So you'll see there's quite a bit of repetition in this technique. You could paint in all the gradient maps layer masks at once and then do the cutting out at the very end. I like to sort of see what I'm doing as I go along. Okay, yeah, let's duplicate using the Control J keyboard shortcut, let's duplicate the robot orange layer and make a grey version. Not black, black's too dark. Yeah, let's go for dark grey as a name. Okay, let's turn off the orange version so we can see what we're doing. Let's desaturate this orange. Ooh. Now I quite like that, so I'm going to copy that grey orange, that warm grey value. I'm going to go back to my orange gradient map layer for the robot and paste that in. Control V that. This is what I mean about cutting the layer masks out as you go along. I just find that the image develops a bit better than doing everything in distinct stages. Okay, yeah, let's desaturate that a bit more. Actually, yeah, make it cool instead of warm. Darken it down. Yeah, so the process really is make a gradient map, define the area that the gradient map influences, you know, paint into the layer mask to define the object, and then adjust the colors and the color stops in the gradient map. Cut those pixels out of any previous gradient maps and rinse and repeat. Okay, so I've got a nice grey gradient map that I want the secondary parts of the robot to have. So now, instead of painting in the pixels, I'm actually deleting the unwanted pixels. So painting in black into the gradient mask. Sorry, into the layer mask of that gradient map. God, there's so many terms, isn't there? Ties your tongue in knots. Okay, yeah, just carrying on, filling it in. Let's speed it up. You could be looser with the part of painting in the pixels. It's a style choice. Okay, yeah. Control left click on the layer mask of the dark grey robot. And select the layer mask of the orange robot layer and hit delete to cut those pixels out. And then we get a true sense of what both gradient maps are doing. Okay, yeah, let's just save out. In case a capybara comes along and kicks your power cable out. You never know, yeah, okay, yeah, just making another copy of the gradient map. And this is going to be for the eye of the eel. The iris, the iris, the middle part of the eye. And because like I said before, I don't want too many colours in the final composition, I'm going to use that discolour also for the couplings, where the tubes join onto the space eel. Yeah, it's a bit... The space eel's having a tough time. Okay, yep, just throwing some pixels in. I'll see, yeah, I do want to make the eye and these couplings a bronzy orange colour anyway. So that's why I duplicate the orange gradient mask. Again, I want as few colour ranges in the final image as possible. Or not too many, you know. I don't want to go monochromatic, but I don't want to go all tutti frutti. I've made that mistake before. Okay, yeah, just filling in the iris with that in that layer mask. Obviously this layer mask is processing on top of a general layer mask, so it's darker than it's going to look until we cut the pixels out of the general layer mask. Yeah, made a duplicate of the robot grey layer, and I'm just filling in the body of the giant space eel. See, as a disorganized artist, I haven't changed the layer name of that eel body one yet. Okay, yeah, I'm just making one big selection from all the different previous layer masks by Control-Shift clicking. You'll see the cursor has a little plus sign so that you can see that you're adding to the selection. I'm going back to make sure that giant space eel's layer mask is selected, and hit delete, and we've cut everything else out. Yeah, let's rename this sensibly. Okay, just gonna color code the layers again, so when I load up the PSD in the future, I know I've got a chance of knowing what's going on. And it's if someone else ever needs to go into your PSD file, it's just nice to make it vaguely organized so they have a nice day in the future. Okay, the gradient map for the giant eel is a bit too dark. Let's deal with that. I'm adjusting the colours. You've seen this bit before, so I'm just going to speed it up a little bit. Yeah. Adjust the tubes a bit. Tickle with a general tone of the image. Just make another copy. And this is going to be for the whites of the eel's eye. As a side note, I like making a lot of my monsters have either insect eyes or mammalian human eyes. So in this case, I drew the space eel with a human eye, because that elicits more empathy from the viewer. So yeah, I want the whole drawing, I wanted it to sort of tell a bit of a story, but still leave enough to the imagination to let the viewer put their own meaning into it. Okay, I've added some pixels to the layer mask of this. Just going back to the iris layer just to tidy up the edge. I mean, you can suffer perfectionism at this point. I should have really zoomed out at this point to see that what the corrections I'm making aren't really needed. They don't really have a big influence in the final piece. But you only realise these things through experience and repetition. Yeah, so yeah, just tidying up the white bit. Obviously you'll notice I haven't changed the colour of this layer mask yet. Just cutting it out of the eel's body so we can see the true representation of the gradient mask when we do adjust it. Let's adjust it now. Let's brighten that up a bit. Yeah, I'm just going to speed this up. Make the white of the eye a nice warm tone. Okay, let's zoom out to get a thumbnail sketch point of view. Yeah, okay. Yeah, the walkway is a bit too light. Yeah, just adjusting the walkways. Darkening them down a bit so they don't take over the image as much. Now I've done that, Yeah, I can see the tubes are now too bright. That's the only risk with this technique of adjusting colours as you go along. You end up forever adjusting colours. Right, let's save that out before the emu kicks the power cable out. Not a good idea to have a pet emu, but someone had to do it. Right, yeah, Control G to make a group of all the gradient maps. Rename that something sensible. And yeah, the gradient map section is done. We've used gradient maps to colour the drawing. And now we're going to develop with other techniques the rest of the image, the rest of the colouring process. So I've made a new normal layer, called it highlights. Made sure I've got a white colour. Make my brush a bit softer. Oh, yeah, nearly forgot. I'm going to change my blending mode to overlay. This makes any light colours sort of amplify the colour below, so you don't really get a white colour. In this case, you see I'm drawing orange. I'm drawing on the orange layer, and it's giving me a light orange highlight. So yeah, right now I'm just in my head working out the direction of the main light source and highlighting the parts of the drawing that are going to receive most of that light. This is just all practice really, but you do get guided by the light areas of your original drawing. If you've shaded the drawing fairly correctly, fairly realistically, then you sort of get guided in this process by only having the highlights generally in the lighter areas of the original drawing. So yeah, on the Space Eel itself, I'm making the highlights a bit crispy because the sort of slipperier, harder the surface is, the crispier the highlights are going to be. Okay. Yeah, just adding some highlights to the tubes, and I think we're good. Now I'm going to change the colour to an orange. With my irises in my eyes, no matter if I do it in 2D or 3D, I like to treat them as if the eye colour is metallic. And metallic surfaces don't have a white highlights generally, unless they've got a plastic coating on top or something like that. Yeah, that orange was too saturated, so I hit Ctrl Z to undo that. Wasn't happy with that colour. Chosen a more yellowy colour. And yeah, now still on the highlights layer, it's still overlay. So yeah, just adding detail to the iris. Yeah, working out where would the light hit on the iris the most. Generally that's the bottom of the iris, because the top of the iris is usually shaded by top eyelids. And yeah, for the sake of the composition not looking too colourful, I'm going to use the exact same highlight colour on these metal bits, these metal couplings, where the rubber tubes are cruelly inserted into the Giant Space Eel. Okay, zoom out, have a quick look. Yeah, happy with that. Save it. Stop the elephant trampling the base unit. Now I'm going to make a shadow layer. And yeah, just got to use a black. Depending on, like, this image is sort of happening in a dark environment. Yeah, I'm going to hit 2 on the keyboard to really make the opacity low. And then you need to zoom out a bit because we only want the edge of the brush. With a large soft brush like this, you only want the edge to work. And I'm sort of going around the image, giving it a bit of a vignette effect. I wasn't happy with that, so I hit Control Z and started again. Yeah, and I've made most of the image too dark, but we're going to use a layer mask and adjust where the pixels are. Just bring it down so we get a bit more detail. Yeah, let's try that again. You find that with digital painting, digital drawing, you do a stroke, look at it, think, I'm going to undo that. Again, I'm just reinforcing the vignette effect. Because I want, like I said before, I want the viewer's eye to go to the center of the image and focus on the robot first. See where the robot's pointing and settle on the eye of the eel. And I want the viewer to consider the plight of the poor eel. Anything after that is the viewer's interpretation. Okay, so I've just selected, I've gone back into my gradient map group to make a selection that compromises of the robot and the walkway. Delete all the pixels, that's way too bright, I'm going to undo that. So I'm just going to paint some black into the layer mask of the shadow layer, and that will erase some of the pixels in the shadow mask. So yeah, just softly going around the robot to lighten him back up. You see the effect on this, on the layer mask in there. So this is a non-destructive way of getting rid of some of the original shadow pixels. Oh yeah, yeah. I'm trying to erase some of the shadow off the tubes, and I'm like, it's not working. I don't understand. It's because I forgot that I had this selection active. That's better. I can now paint on the whole area of the image. Yeah, hit 1 on the keyboard, not the numpad, just to make the opacity of the brush really, really soft and subtle. Because I don't want big, aggressive highlights on the tubes. Yeah, just a touch. Little bit on the background tubes. You know, a little bit of light is going to reach over there. Okay, zoom out, have a look at it. Yeah, still too much shadow on the walkways. I'm just going to select those again. Go back to the layer mask of the shadow layer. Just going to take some shadow pixels away. Because this top edge would receive some light. This vertical surface would receive some more light. Top edge of the handrail again, that's going to receive a bit more light than is presently there. I haven't realised I'm drawing on the robot's bum, but he's not selected, so that's not going to do anything. Yeah, I've gone back to the layer, not the layer mask, just to add some more shadow where I need it. yeah, it's this back and forth process, tickling the layer. I'm doing it again there, look. That part's not selected, so nothing's going to happen. No, it's not going to happen. When do I realise? Oh, there we go. Yeah. Okay. Control D. Deselected everything, and now I can paint on this little bit of void underneath the giant space eel. Okay. Now I'm going to, making sure that the very most toppest layer is selected. I'm going to hit Control, Shift, Alt and E. And this is a bit of an obscure function in Photoshop, but it makes a new layer that's a compilation of everything that's visible. And I changed that layer to color dodge, blending mode, and you see this is a bit of a cheat mode. It immediately doubles the gamma of the whole image. It's sort of really makes everything pop. So I've given it a layer mask, inverted the layer mask with Control I, because I want to control where that pop happens. Don't want it to happen on the edges of the image, because I'm mindful of where I want the viewer's eye to go. So I'm going to get a nice big soft brush, and this is a fun part of the process. This is just like adding the gravy at the end. There we go, just literally a one click there, so the space eel's got a bit more pop. I think, just one more fun final click in the middle. Okay, yeah, that's pretty good. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate the layer, Control J. I'm going to select everything, hit delete to get rid of everything in the layer mask. And now I'm going to change this to linear dodge add. I'm going to invert this layer mask so we can see what that does. And this gives a nice glare effect, as if the virtual camera lens is just overcome with light. So I'm going to label that add for when I load this up in 5 years time. Control I to get rid of all the pixels. And yeah, this is just a little delicate bit of spice at the end. Don't want to go overboard on this. Just to click on the eel's eye, and I think that gives a real sort of milkiness to you get a sense of the light scattering in the eye fluid. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Okay, I'm just going to make the overall composition a bit more cinematic. So let's sort of cut out the tubes, leave some of the tubes in the background just to give a hint to the viewer that there's tubes on this side of the eel, but there's also tubes on the right side of the eel. Sort of making the eye and the hand of the robot in the middle of the image vertically. Yeah, C for bringing up the crop tool. And that's that. F twice to hide the GUI in Photoshop, so you get this nice display mode. Control R to hide the rulers. And yeah, that's how I colour a drawing in using gradient maps. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you all in the next one.